He thought it would be just another quiet evening at his friend's house. Until her voice, low and daring, changed everything. "If you stay, I'll make it worth every second." The evening had the kind of stillness that made every sound feel louder. I wasn't planning to stay long, just drop off a few things to my friend and head out. But as soon as I stepped inside, his phone buzzed. An emergency. He grabbed his keys, muttered a rushed apology, and within seconds, the front door closed behind him, leaving me alone in the warm light of the house, with his mother. She appeared from the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on a soft linen towel. Amira, graceful, composed, 42, with the kind of presence that didn't need announcing. Her dark hair was pinned loosely at the back, a few strands falling forward to frame her face in a way that felt both elegant and unguarded. "Oh," she said with a gentle smile, "looks like it's just us tonight." The smell of simmering tomato sauce filled the air, wrapping the room in a homely comfort. She tilted her head slightly. "You haven't eaten yet, have you?" I started to protest, but she waved me toward the table with a soft insistence that made refusing impossible. The kitchen glowed under warm, yellow light. Outside, the sky was bruising into twilight. She moved around with quiet confidence, stirring the sauce, setting plates, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek with the back of her hand. It wasn't just what she did, it was how. Every movement felt deliberate, almost mesmerizing. As we sat across from each other, conversation flowed easily at first: work, mutual acquaintances, harmless jokes. But slowly, something shifted. I started noticing things I hadn't before: the way she leaned forward slightly when she laughed, how her eyes lingered a heartbeat longer than expected, how her voice had a low warmth to it that made the room feel smaller. She asked questions that weren't just polite, they were attentive. "Do you like what you're doing? Are you happy where you are?" Her gaze never wavered, and I found myself answering more honestly than I usually would. At one point, a bit of sauce splashed onto my hand as I reached for the bread. She laughed softly, reached over with a napkin, and gently dabbed at it. Her fingers brushed my skin, light, brief, but enough to make my chest tighten unexpectedly. Dinner stretched longer than it should have. And as twilight deepened outside, I realized this wasn't just a casual meal anymore. There was an invisible thread in the air between us, quiet, unspoken, but undeniably there. After dinner, the house settled into that soft quiet that only comes on rainy nights. A faint rumble of thunder echoed in the distance, and a cool breeze slipped through the slightly open window. The scent of rain on warm pavement filled the air. She suggested we move to the living room while the storm passed, her tone casual but eyes holding mine for just a fraction too long. The living room was dim except for a tall floor lamp in the corner, its golden light spilling across the couch and coffee table like a warm pool. She returned from the kitchen with 2 glasses of red wine. "It's not often I have company on a night like this," she said, handing me one. Her fingers brushed mine, barely, but the warmth lingered even after the glass was in my hand. We sat on opposite ends of the couch at first, out of habit, but the mood was different now, slower, more deliberate. Rain began to patter against the large window behind us, creating a soft, rhythmic soundtrack. It felt like the world had folded inward, leaving just the two of us in this pocket of warm light and rain. Our conversation started with safe topics: music, travel, my plans for the future. But she steered it gently toward deeper waters, the way only someone older and emotionally perceptive could. She spoke about her past, not in grand stories, but in quiet fragments, moments where she'd chosen responsibility over dreams, years spent taking care of everyone else until she forgot what it meant to be seen for herself. Her voice softened as she admitted, "It's strange, people see you every day, but they stop looking. You become part of the background." She let out a quiet laugh, not bitter, just honest. I watched her closely. For all her confidence and composure, there was something fragile underneath, a woman who had carried the weight of years gracefully but was finally allowing a few pieces to show. Without realizing it, I'd leaned closer. Her hand moved to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and my knee brushed hers. The touch was accidental, but neither of us moved away. The air shifted, denser, charged. I told her I understood more than she thought. She turned her head slowly to look at me, really look, and in that silent gaze, something passed between us. Not flirtation. Not recklessness. Just two people daring to be emotionally seen. The rain grew heavier outside. Inside, the silence between words began to say more than the words themselves. The rain grew heavier, drumming softly against the windows like a heartbeat. Then, with a sudden flicker, the lights went out. The house was briefly swallowed by darkness, followed by her soft, unbothered laugh, a sound both calming and intimate. "Don't worry," she said, her voice a warm thread through the dark. "Happens every time there's a proper storm." A moment later, the gentle glow of candles began to fill the room. She moved gracefully around the living area, lighting each one, on the mantel, the coffee table, the bookshelf, until the space shimmered in a golden, flickering light. It cast soft shadows across her face, highlighting the lines of experience around her eyes, the effortless elegance in her movements. When she finally sat back down, she chose the middle cushion of the couch, closer than before. I shifted slightly to make room, and for the first time, our knees pressed together, not by accident this time, but by quiet choice. Neither of us acknowledged it aloud, but the contact was warm, steady, grounding. She reached behind her for a folded throw blanket draped over the couch. "It's getting chilly," she murmured, unfolding it with deliberate care. Then, with a small, almost shy smile, she placed it over both our laps. As she did, her fingers grazed the back of my hand, soft and unhurried. It wasn't a careless touch, it lingered, just long enough to make my breath catch. Her skin was warm against mine, her nails lightly tracing the edge of my knuckles as she adjusted the fabric. A simple act, but my pulse reacted like it was something far bigger. The storm outside faded into background noise. Our conversation slowed, becoming less about topics and more about tone, quieter, more personal. She asked me about my dreams, not out of politeness, but like someone genuinely curious. When I spoke, she listened intently, her eyes soft and unwavering. As I talked, she shifted subtly closer, her shoulder brushing mine. The scent of her perfume, light, floral, mixed with the faint warmth of candle smoke, wrapped around me. I became hyper-aware of every small movement, the way her fingers curled under the blanket, how her breathing slowed to match the rhythm of the rain. There was no dramatic declaration, no sudden confession. Just two people sitting close, sharing a space where the unspoken spoke louder than anything else. And in that moment, her lingering touch felt like the quiet beginning of something neither of us had planned, but both of us felt. The storm outside had settled into a steady rhythm, like a lullaby that made the world feel smaller and softer. The candles burned low now, their light warmer, more intimate, painting the room in gentle gold. The air between us carried a quiet charge, not rushed, but undeniably alive. She swirled the last sip of wine in her glass, her gaze drifting to the window. "It's getting late," she said softly, but there was no hint of dismissal in her tone. If anything, it sounded like a thought spoken aloud, a feeling tested. "I should probably get going," I replied, though even as I said it, my body made no move to leave. She turned her head slowly toward me, her expression unreadable at first, composed, graceful, the way she always carried herself. But behind her eyes, something flickered. A quiet daring. Her fingers traced absent-minded circles along the rim of her glass, a nervous habit she didn't bother to hide. "You don't have to," she murmured. Her voice was lower now, softer, the kind of tone that makes you lean in without realizing. I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't playing games. There was a vulnerability in her posture, shoulders drawn slightly inward, lips parted as if she'd just said something heavier than expected. She set her glass down slowly, deliberately, and leaned back against the couch cushion, turning her body toward me. Then, in a whisper that threaded through the quiet like a spark, she said it, "If you stay, I'll make it worth every second." The words hung in the air, weighty and electric. My heart stumbled. Time didn't stop, it stretched. I saw the way her fingers fidgeted briefly with the edge of the blanket, betraying her calm. She wasn't luring me in, she was letting something deeply honest slip through. I swallowed, caught between instinct and hesitation. My mind ran through 1,000 reasons to leave, the age gap, my friendship with her son, the uncharted territory this could open, but every reason collided with the quiet gravity in her eyes. The storm outside cracked softly with distant thunder, like punctuation to the moment. She held my gaze, steady now, the nervousness replaced by quiet certainty. I didn't answer immediately. I didn't need to. The silence between us did the talking, a silence thick with choice, tension, and the first undeniable shift from what we were, to what we might become. The words hung in the air like a suspended note, fragile, beautiful, dangerous. I didn't rush to fill the silence. Neither did she. Instead, the storm outside seemed to answer for us, rolling gently in the distance while the rain softened to a calming whisper. I finally said, almost under my breath, "I'll stay." She didn't react dramatically. She just exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath without realizing. A soft, almost relieved smile appeared at the corner of her lips. She shifted closer, the blanket rustling between us, until our legs were fully pressed together beneath it, warm through the fabric. The living room had grown quiet enough that I could hear the faint tick of a clock in the hallway. She adjusted the blanket again, and this time, our hands met underneath. No accident. Her fingers brushed against mine, hesitant at first, like testing the edge of a wave, then settled there. Her thumb began to trace slow, delicate circles over the back of my hand. It was such a simple movement, but it sent a deep, quiet warmth through me. My pulse quickened. My breathing slowed to match hers. I turned toward her. She mirrored me. Suddenly, our faces were just inches apart, framed by the flickering candlelight. I could feel her breath, warm, steady, carrying the faint scent of red wine and rain. Her eyes searched mine, not for permission exactly, but for honesty. Neither of us moved forward. That wasn't the kind of moment this was. It wasn't rushed, it was suspended, two people balanced on the edge of something that felt both terrifying and magnetic. Then, she leaned her head gently against my shoulder. Not a timid gesture, but one filled with quiet trust. Her hair brushed my neck softly, and I felt her exhale against my skin. Instinctively, I wrapped an arm around her, pulling the blanket closer around us. She didn't resist, she melted into the space like she had belonged there all along. The world outside faded, no storm, no time, no rules. Just her warmth against my side, the rhythmic rise and fall of her breathing, and the soft weight of her hands still intertwined with mine. There was no kiss, no confession. Just closeness so profound it didn't need words. In that moment, it wasn't about what could happen, it was about what was, a quiet, charged connection that neither of us wanted to break. Hours seemed to pass unnoticed. The rain softened to a delicate drizzle, tapping lightly against the windows like a soft metronome. The candles burned lower, their glow warm and intimate, bathing the living room in a golden hush. We were still side by side on the couch, her head resting gently against my shoulder, our fingers loosely entwined beneath the blanket. It wasn't silence that filled the space, it was something richer. The kind of quiet where truths feel safe to come out. She lifted her head slightly, just enough to look at me, and asked softly, "Can I tell you something?" I nodded. She began to talk, not with rehearsed words, but with the kind of honesty that only appears late at night, when the world is asleep. She told me about her youth, dreams of traveling, of painting, of a life that had once been wide open. Then came the responsibilities, motherhood, expectations, the quiet sacrifices that slowly, almost invisibly, rearranged her life into something steadier but smaller. Her voice didn't crack, it flowed like a calm river, steady and real. But her eyes carried weight. Sometimes, she said, I wonder if people stop seeing you once you stop shining for them. You become dependable. Comfortable. But invisible. I listened, really listened. She wasn't asking for pity, she was sharing a piece of herself. I told her things too, how I often felt caught between who I wanted to be and who I was expected to become. She didn't laugh or minimize, she leaned in closer, her eyes soft and attentive, as though my words truly mattered. At one point, as I spoke, she reached up to fix my slightly rumpled collar. Her fingers brushed the side of my neck, slow and natural, and for a split second, neither of us breathed. Her touch lingered just long enough to leave a warmth that spread through my chest. She laughed quietly afterward, almost to herself. You have no idea how much younger energy changes a room, she said. It wasn't flirtation, it was admiration, mixed with a hint of wistfulness. The hours unfolded in quiet confessions and shared stories, not rushed but unwrapped carefully, layer by layer. We weren't strangers, but this was the first time we were truly meeting each other. By the time the last candle guttered out, the space between us felt transformed, no longer filled with tension alone, but with trust. Two lives, briefly intersecting, finding honesty in the most unexpected hours of the night. By the time we drifted into silence, the storm had passed completely. The house was wrapped in that deep, heavy stillness that comes just before dawn. Neither of us had moved for what felt like hours, her hand still loosely in mine, her head resting softly against my chest now, our breathing perfectly in sync. At some point, we both must have fallen asleep on the couch, surrounded by the faint scent of extinguished candles and rain. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed was the pale gold of early morning spilling through the curtains, painting everything in a soft, forgiving light. She was already awake, sitting quietly in the armchair across from me, wrapped in a light gray robe, her hair loosely tied back. She held a steaming mug of coffee in both hands, looking out the window with a kind of peaceful stillness I hadn't seen in her before. When she turned and saw me awake, a warm smile slowly spread across her face. Not the polite smile she'd worn earlier in the evening, this one was unhurried, real, the kind that reaches the eyes. I made you coffee, she said gently. Her voice had that early morning softness to it, lower, warmer. She walked over and handed me the mug. Her fingers brushed mine, this time intentionally, a slow, deliberate touch that carried quiet meaning. Neither of us rushed to speak. The living room, bathed in morning light, felt entirely different now. Last night's tension had softened into something calmer, a quiet understanding, like two people who had crossed a line together without needing to define it. I hope you slept okay, she said, sitting beside me again, her knee touching mine beneath the blanket that had slipped down during the night. I did, I replied, my voice still heavy with sleep. Better than I expected. She laughed softly, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Me too. There was no talk of what the night meant. No dramatic declarations. Just the kind of silence where everything important had already been said, not with words, but through shared warmth, glances, and quiet gestures. When it was time for me to leave, she walked me to the door. I slipped on my jacket, heart oddly steady. Just before I stepped outside, she reached out, lightly touched my arm, and whispered, "You know where to find me." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a moment suspended between past and future, something real, quietly alive, waiting.